After texting the wrong number, a lonely CEO discovered an amazing connection with flowers. Mark's fingers hovered over his phone, the tapping keys echoing in the silence of his office. The weight of exhaustion pressed down on him, compounded by frequent failures and profit margins that continued to dwindle. He was trapped in a world of expectations, where ambition suffocated connections that mattered. With a burst of frustration, he typed out a message intended for his business partner. "We need to crush them, no more mercy." But with one misplaced digit, he had reached someone else entirely. "Hi there, I think you've got the wrong number. Who's them?" Her cheerful response was like a splash of cold water over Mark's weary psyche. He stared at the message, disbelief mingling with curiosity. Who was this Lily, this florist, who responded to his threat with such warmth? Suddenly he found himself typing back, the walls around him feeling a little less suffocating. As their conversations unfolded, Mark revealed pieces of his life that had long been neglected. "Everything feels like a race to stay ahead, and I lose sight of what really matters," he confessed, voice almost breaking as he shared his fears of failure, both personally and professionally. "I don't even see my family anymore. Too busy chasing this elusive dream." Lily's gentle stories about flowers came like a balm to his frayed nerves. Each bloom carries a message of resilience. "Some of the hardest to nurture are the most beautiful," she wrote. The contrast between her spirited tales and his bleak reality intensified his longing for connection, planting seeds of doubt in his relentless pursuit of success. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The daily exchanges turned into a lifeline. Yet as his startup spiraled closer to collapse, Mark faced an insidious moral dilemma. Should he indulge in a petty vendetta against a rival who had wronged him? Or should he dig deeper for family loyalty? He pondered this as he prepared to confront the very man who had been burying his company in corporate underhandedness. The anxiety churned within him like a storm. Had his relentless ambition blinded him to everything he once valued? Lily's inspiring words echoed in his mind, rekindling thoughts of the family he had pushed aside. He sought out images of vibrant blooms she'd sent him, a reminder of beauty amid the chaos. But all of that changed when she revealed a connection that would rewire everything. Their families shared ties woven into the fabric of their pasts, relationships buried by choices both had made. Mark found himself spiraling into an existential abyss. Here he stood, a mere step away from reclaiming his legacy, yet tormented by the recognition that the ambition he clung to might cost him everything. Would he let the desire for vindication sabotage the genuine connection that had bloomed in the most unexpected place, or was the risk worth the dive? As the stark reality settled in, he realized that the most difficult question lay before him. How much was he willing to sacrifice for success? Mark paced his office, the sunlight filtering through the glass walls casting long shadows on the floor. He felt caught in a crossroads. The flickering screen of his phone reminded him of the lifeline he had stumbled upon through his mistake. Each message from Lily had unraveled layers of him he thought were long buried beneath corporate armor. Yet now, with the weight of decision pressing heavily on his chest, that calm connection felt like a distant whisper. The meeting drew near, and he could already envision the confrontation. The rival CEO, a man who thrived on deceit and volatility, had become the embodiment of everything Mark despised. "Crush them," he had said in an impulsive moment, allowing anger to dictate his intentions. But in the days since his connection with Lily began to blossom, a new perspective emerged. What if competition was not about annihilation but growth? "Mark, you know this can't end well if you go into it with revenge in mind," he muttered, shaking his head as if warding off negativity. Yet the ghost of his previous self lingered, ready to pull him back into a fray he had grown to detest. The more he considered it, the more he recognized an uncomfortable truth. In seeking vengeance, he would risk losing not only business, but also any shred of humanity left in him. As the clock ticked down, Mark sat at his desk, fingers poised above the keyboard. A message from Lily appeared suddenly, a serene photograph of a sunflower, its bright yellow petals reaching for the sky. Her text read, "Sometimes letting go of the need to win brings the most beautiful result." The line struck him, rekindling his resolve to find a better way to engage with his challenges. The memories of his family came flooding back. Dinners interrupted by phone calls, weekends swallowed by meetings. Mark could almost hear their laughter, an echo that had become muted over time. Would avenging his pride reconnect him with what mattered, or further alienate him from the bonds that still waited to be rekindled? This question resonated deeply, pushing him to a place of honesty, a rare and invaluable space for a man in his position. With newfound clarity, he typed out a message to Lily, revealing his doubts about the confrontation ahead. "I'm terrified of what I'm becoming," he sent. "But your words remind me that there's strength in gentleness. How can I face them without losing myself?" Her reply was immediate and thoughtful. "Strength arises in vulnerability. Face them armed with who you truly are, not the armor you wear in business. The truest victories can exist in reconciliation." Each word was a thread pulling him back toward the humanity he feared he had forsaken. The tension in his body eased slightly as he considered this approach. Confrontation rooted in a place of integrity rather than enmity. Mark stood up, feeling lighter, almost buoyant. The course ahead was uncertain, yet he was ready to embrace it. Taking a deep breath, he prepared himself for the meeting. This time, he would confront his rival with intentions rooted in family and partnership, rather than destruction. As he left his office, a thought flickered across his mind. If he truly pursued this new path, what would become of the industry that had hardened his heart? His thoughts drifted to Lily's warm spirit, and how, through a simple miscommunication, she had breathed life into his dormant aspirations. The path now stretched before him, aching with tension but brimming with potential. Would he find a way to honor his family's legacy through a heart-driven approach? Or would he slip back into the old patterns, driven solely by greed and competition? The time had come to face his choices, and within that confrontation lay the potential for a profound transformation. Mark stepped into the conference room, the air thick with unspoken tension and stale ambition. The long table gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights, illuminated the faces of his team, eyes darting nervously, each one sensing the gravity of the impending clash. Their expectations settled uneasily on Mark's shoulders. He was no longer just a CEO, he was a man wrestling with dichotomies within himself. As the rival CEO entered, swaggering with predatory confidence, Mark felt a familiar tightening in his chest. This was the same man who enjoyed toying with others' livelihoods, treating the boardroom like a battlefield. Time had dulled Mark's distaste for such cutthroat tactics, but now, in the wake of his recent epiphanies, he found himself questioning everything. Could he confront his foe while remaining true to the more compassionate part of himself that he was beginning to understand? "Let's cut to the chase," the rival began, smiling with a gleam of malice. "I plan to outbid you for the Henderson contract." Mark could feel the words, sharp and aimed. Old instincts kicked in, urging him to retaliate. He could feel the fire of competitive rage sparking inside him. Yet with each breath, he summoned the memory of Lily's sunflower, its golden petals reaching for the sun, a symbol of resilience and beauty in growth. Control and tenderness. Could he navigate this conversation with both? It was time to test this new perspective. "Actually, I believe we both want what's best for our organizations," Mark surprised himself by saying, his voice steady though his heart raced. "But I think it's imperative we approach this differently. The corporate landscape is changing, and I see value in collaboration, not just competition." His opponent froze for a split second before a burst of laughter erupted. "Collaboration? Please, this isn't a charity. It's business." Mark leaned forward, meeting his rival's gaze. The bravado of his former self itched to emerge, the man who could break anyone down with words alone. But he held firm, aware of the evolution taking shape within him. "I disagree," he continued, projecting sincerity. "I've spent far too long focusing solely on winning, and for what? The victories that come at the cost of relationships feel hollow. We can disrupt the market, yes, but imagine how much more impactful we could be working together." The room went quiet. For the first time, Mark's team looked at him with curiosity. Their past leader suddenly transformed into a figure of unexpected integrity. There was a flicker of hope in their eyes, but the rival CEO was not convinced. "You think your sweet talk is going to change decades of corporate warfare?" the man sneered, refusing to budge. Mark felt a surge of determination. "It's not about changing the past, it's about building a future that respects our teams, our values, and our customers. The world is moving towards collaboration, and we should consider leading that shift rather than resisting it." His words hung in the air, heavy with sincerity. As if breaking through a glass barrier, the weight of decades-old animosity began to crack. The rival CEO stared, confusion warring with incredulity. Perhaps Mark's challenge was not as ridiculous as he'd first assumed. There was strength in presenting a different paradigm. Conversations began to shift. Murmurs of agreement started to fade into the silence that followed Mark's radical upturning of expectations. Could vulnerability shape a new avenue instead of rigid traditionalism? As the meeting progressed, every pushback and scoff from the rival afforded Mark insights into old struggles, illuminating a path towards a truer negotiation. Hope emerged not only for potential collaboration, but also in himself. He was beginning to carve out a way that merged professional aspirations with robust ethics. After the meeting concluded, Mark found himself retreating from the room both exhilarated and exhausted. Had he really steered a confrontation toward growth? Still processing this, he paused outside the conference room, breathless with uncertainty and possibility. There lay the question. If he could cultivate empathy in an otherwise hostile environment, what other boundaries could he transcend? Would he be able to unravel the complexities of his emotional landscape and lead authentically not just in his company, but in every relationship that mattered? The deeper journey into his own psyche had just begun, and that grounding vision would require nurturing and courage. Could he maintain this newfound resolve against the tide of an industry resistant to change? The stakes had never been higher, and Mark was acutely aware of how far he had to go. As he stepped away from the meeting, fortified but aware of looming uncertainties, a text from Lily appeared on his phone. A single sunflower emoji graced the screen, a timely reminder that growth required patience and resilience. Would he embrace the difficult road ahead? The time for deeper introspection was at hand, and new revelations awaited just beyond the horizon. Mark walked through the corporate halls, a whirlwind of thoughts engulfing him. The echoes of the meeting resonated in his mind, not only from what had been said, but from the look on his team's faces. Their eyes had sparked a flicker of hope in him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in quite some time. Could it be that vulnerability had a place in leadership? As he entered his office, he noticed the enormous glass windows framing the skyline, a sharp contrast to the tumult inside him. He paced the room, each step driven by a mix of fear and excitement about his burgeoning philosophy. The urgency of redefining success struck him. What if he laid the groundwork for a company culture steeped in empathy and collaboration? What would that require from him personally? He realized he was attempting to change the heroic narrative from one of triumph to one that included the stories of others. The challenge now was recognizing the weight of that responsibility. He understood that this would not be easy, especially in a world conditioned to valorize aggression over cooperation. Would those around him follow if he displayed openness? Mark sank into his chair, reflecting on the transformations brought forth by his interactions. If he were to lead authentically, he needed to explore not only how he enacted his principles, but also how he could invite his team to reflect upon theirs. His team had been so focused on survival in a cutthroat industry that they might have forgotten the power of shared values. Was it possible they would embrace a collaborative spirit? They had witnessed him in a moment of courage today. Perhaps there was room for a deeper bond than mere workplace alliances. He muted the background noise of the office and drafted a message to his team. Let's hold a roundtable next week to discuss our core values. I want to listen to your thoughts on collaboration as an alternative to competition. It felt ambitious, almost foolhardy, but that sparked a thrill. He hit send, feeling a mix of vulnerability and empowerment. Yet as the thrill subsided, self-doubt crept in. Would they laugh at this out-of-character plea? They had been trained in the art of one-upping, not sharing. The remnants of his unease reminded him of the days when he believed solely in winning. This was the real test of character. Would he stand firm in the face of potential ridicule? A knock at the door broke his reverie. Claire, his chief operations officer, peeked into his office, her brow furrowing with concern. "Are you all right? You've been a bit different lately, less combative," she ventured cautiously. "Different isn't necessarily bad, Claire. Have you ever thought about how we define success?" Mark replied, feeling the eagerness for this conversation eclipse his previous anxieties. Her curiosity piqued. "There's something you're hinting at. I'd like to hear your thoughts." Encouraged, he shared his vision of transforming the company's culture. He articulated his desire for collaboration, explaining how emotionally attuned leadership might yield more than just profit margins. It could bolster morale, create loyalty, and fuel innovation. Claire listened intently, her brow relaxing. "Mark," she said, "if you're serious about this, we'll have to take baby steps." Change is often met with resistance, especially when people don't see the immediate benefits. Her honesty cut deep, yet it was what Mark needed to hear. This wasn't about convincing everyone in one fell swoop. It was about being patient and nurturing a seed of collaboration. "I'm aware of that," he replied, resolving to be more strategic. "But perhaps our session next week can be the first step. If our core values shift towards collaboration, the growth could speak for itself." As Claire left, Mark stood by the window, watching the city bathed in sunset hues. He internally mapped out his next steps, gauging how to cultivate this vision in an environment steeped in skepticism. The undertaking would require exceptional emotional agility and sharp strategic thinking. But what lay beneath that surface was a new resolve. He aimed not just to shield his organization from the tumultuous winds of cutthroat business manners, but to redefine the entire landscape. Just then, his phone buzzed with a new text. It was Lily again, this time with an article link titled, "The Power of Connection in Business." He opened the page, only to be met with strategies on cognitive empathy in corporate environments. Mark chuckled, recognizing irony. Was her influence shaping his company indirectly? The road ahead appeared daunting, but it was alive with promise. He could feel it in his gut. He needed to step further out of his comfort zone. What would it take for him to stand up against skeptics while maintaining openness? The personal landscape of his aspirations expanded before him, but challenges loomed on the horizon. He had taken his first steps. Yet, as an emerging leader, reality began to pose the question: would his foundations hold firm under pressure? Mark awoke the next day with a sense of determination that had eluded him for years. He had tossed and turned most of the night, his mind spinning with possibilities. The idea of a roundtable discussion continued to replay in his thoughts, morphing and taking shape like a clay sculpture under a potter's hands. It wasn't just a meeting, it was the potential birth of a new culture within his organization, a culture grounded in meaningful dialogue and shared values. Arriving at the office, he greeted his team with unexpected warmth. Their reactions varied. Some looked startled, while others seemed cautiously optimistic. At that moment, Mark recognized the enormity of the shift he was striving for. He wasn't simply redefining his approach. He was challenging a foundational mindset that had shaped nearly every interaction in the corporate realm. As the meeting day approached, thoughts of doubt persisted. He felt the weight of the potential backlash. He could almost hear the skeptical whispers and see the rolled eyes. Yet something deeper stirred within him, a fierce resolve not to abandon his vision. He confided in Claire on how uncertain he felt. "What if they reject it outright? What if this beats me down?" Her gaze softened. "Mark, real transformation often meets resistance, but that doesn't diminish its value. Be prepared for the pushback, but don't let it stifle your voice." The days leading to the round table brought both excitement and dread. He found himself studying his team, imagining their reactions. Every time he passed through the office, he was tempted to call out, "What do you think of this change?" Instead, he chose patience, letting them contemplate and arrive at their conclusions in their own time. Moments of vulnerability surfaced, forcing him to reflect on his leadership journey thus far. He had spent years commanding respect through sheer will and achievement, but now he craved something deeper, a connection that would embed loyalty within his team. Would they open up? Could he trust them to ditch the competitive armor for a moment? On the eve of the round table, he chose to practice mindfulness, a strategy that allowed him to acknowledge his anxieties without giving them power. He rolled out his yoga mat and took slow, measured breaths, visualizing a scenario in which his colleagues expressed their concerns openly and honored his vision. The day of the meeting arrived, its significance palpable in the air. Participants filled the conference room with murmurs that carried a sense of trepidation. Mark paced at the front, sensing both curiosity and resentment battling in the hearts of his team. They were asking themselves, could they truly abandon what had worked for so long? Gathering his composure, Mark opened the floor. "I want to hear your thoughts without judgment," he began, his voice steadier than he felt. "Let's explore the idea of collaboration together." Silence followed, thick and heavy. He could feel the tension pushing against his resolve. Would his commitment to this vulnerable approach shine through, or would his fears turn his efforts into nothing more than a fumbled initiative? Finally, a voice broke through, the skeptical yet promising tone of Riley, a generally distant member of his team. "It sounds nice, Mark, but in our industry, emotions don't lead to profits." Mark felt a jolt of apprehension, but held on to the notion that this was a teaching moment. What if emotions could guide innovation? What if connection could lead to greater profits? Riley raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite himself. Are we really talking about feelings here? The resulting discussion became a whirlwind of exchanges. Skepticism met with vulnerability, and fear met with curiosity. Mark leaned into this dynamic, feeling the pulse of a culture shift beneath him. As the meeting unfolded, he caught a glimpse of possibility. A flicker of hope echoed in their conversations. But a part of him remained unsettled. This was only the beginning, and the real test would come when the initial enthusiasm wore off. Questions loomed. Would his team remain engaged? Would old habits resurface, undermining the progress they had made? The atmosphere shifted, revealing the underlying desire for change. And while the session witnessed an awakening of sorts, Mark couldn't ignore the reality that lay ahead. He understood the challenge was far from over. Skirmishes with expectation and tradition were inevitable. When Claire approached him afterward, she remarked, "You initiated something worthwhile today. Just remember, momentum is fragile." Mark nodded, aware that the journey ahead would demand relentless nurturing. But as he traversed the line between hope and resistance, another text beeped on his phone. It was Lily again. This time a simple question, one that churned with implications. How was the round table? That innocuous question stirred something deep within him, reminding Mark that the support he craved was often closer than he realized. Would he lean into this support, or would his past strengths dominate his growth? He had the ball rolling, but now, would he allow collaboration to become the very tool that propelled him forward? Mark's initial exhilaration from the roundtable discussion had shifted into a deep introspection. The excitement of sharing ideas had blended with the chilling reality of sustaining momentum. As he looked around the sparsely decorated office space, the same cubicles that had once seemed confining now felt like a realm of untapped potential. Yet, a nagging question loomed. How long could they maintain this newfound engagement? He stepped into his office and sank into his chair, instinctively reaching for his phone again. The vibrant chatter from the meeting still echoed in his mind, but the reality of the daily grind loomed even closer. The doubt that had plagued him before nagged at him anew. Maybe Riley was right. What could emotions really contribute to their bottom line? He shook the thought away, resolving to focus on the progress they had made. It began with small actions. He made it a point to have casual conversations with his team, leaning against the doorframe as they brimmed with ideas related to projects long forgotten. Their laughter mixed with discussions of objectives, and as the days went on, he learned that authentic connection is built in those unguarded moments. Participation at the next meeting began to grow organically as the team opened up, but he could sense that his leadership style was still unsteady. They were waiting for assurance that this collaborative effort wouldn't vanish. Mark felt the weight of expectation pull down on him as he prepared for a follow-up meeting. Would he now slide back into his old authoritative ways if the discussion devolved? Anxiety curled inside him, an unwelcome acquaintance as he crafted the agenda. Every time he tapped his pen, it echoed the unsteady rhythm of his heart. The bold promises of the previous roundtable felt distant, and he questioned if he was ready to face the reactions that might come if he stumbled. Better prepared this time, he arrived at the next meeting with a slightly different plan. Instead of steering the conversation, he kicked off the meeting with a thought-provoking question. What do you think is our greatest obstacle to collaboration? The silence stretched, and for a brief moment, Mark's uncertainty threatened to surface. But one by one, team members shared their thoughts. Past frustrations, communication breakdowns, and fears of vulnerability. They peeled back layers, exposing the raw edges of their experiences. Identifying the collective anxiety made his heart race, but also kindled a flame of resilience in him. Writing down their concerns, he recognized that hidden beneath that fear lay an immense well of potential. Leaning into the rawness of their comments, rather than shying away, equipped him with insight he hadn't anticipated. Could it be that their hesitations could transform into the very foundation of his leadership? A sense of purpose surged within him, changing the atmosphere from tension to empowerment. The more he encouraged them to voice not only their doubts, but also their ideas for solving them, the more engaged they became. Mark saw faces brighten as solutions sparked, and he realized something vital. The essence of collaboration was not solely in the sharing of ideas, but also in the shared resolution of challenges. After the meeting, Claire approached him with a bemused expression. You seemed almost relaxed today. Was it the gratitude you received from them? It felt different this time, Mark admitted. I think they were okay to be vulnerable. It's what we needed. As they stood by the window overlooking the bustling city, Mark's gaze caught the reflection of confidence in Claire's eyes. Maybe the momentum was more than fragile, it was burgeoning. At that moment, he understood that his evolution hinged not merely on collaboration, but on vulnerability as an anchor. Unsure but invigorated, he found himself behind his desk again, fingers hovering over the keyboard to draft an email, soliciting input from his team on future initiatives. He typed slowly, mindful of the distance he needed to bridge with this outreach. This simple action felt monumental. Was this nurturing or merely extending the lifeline of the collaborative approach he had begun? Then his phone chimed once more. A text from Lily again, still curious, but with a new edge. "What's next for you, Mark?" That single question sparked recognition within him. Collaborating and engaging others was one thing. The next step involved articulating a vision that encapsulated this fresh approach. Would he step into the role of a visionary leader rather than merely a facilitator? Or would fear settle back in the shadows? Mark pondered deeply as he stared at the screen, the uncertainty transforming into anticipation of the possibilities that lay ahead, for himself and his team. The next chapter in this journey was about to unfold, and its foundation lay in the bold commitment he'd make during their next steps. Would he be ready to embrace this next challenge as he continued to redefine what it meant to lead? Mark absorbed Lily's inquiry, grappling with how to articulate a vision born not from authority, but from collaboration. Her playful tone, however innocuous, circled around the essence of his burgeoning growth. What lay ahead for him wasn't just an exercise in leadership, but a profound reconstruction of his professional identity. The next day, as Mark arrived at the office, he felt a shift within himself. It wasn't merely a matter of leading a team, but a commitment to leading with authenticity, a concept that seemed decadent, yet terrifying. He reflected on the moments of vulnerability from the meeting, the responsiveness his team had shown, and how they had seemingly transformed into a unit yearning for collective success. He pulled his chair closer to the conference table, envisioning a workshop where they could harness their latent creativity and ideas. This was the first step in crystallizing his vision. Empowering them with responsibility would take his leadership to another level. But how should he initiate it? Just as he made some notes on a fresh agenda, a familiar voice floated in. "I hear someone is brewing a vision in here." It was Riley, entering with her signature confidence, the kind that marked her as both ally and challenge. Mark hesitated, instinctively retreating to his comfort zone. "Just trying to gather thoughts on our next initiatives." Gathering thoughts? Come on, Mark. You need to define what direction we're heading. Every ship needs a captain with stars to steer by. Riley's challenge nudged unanswered questions to the surface. Did he really have his stars lined up? Would they guide not just himself, but everyone on his team? The pressure to perform intensified with her scrutiny. His mind raced as potential flaws in his vision flickered like faulty lights. "Okay, what if I structured a workshop?" Mark replied, a spark of determination igniting within him. "We could brainstorm, set out our goals collaboratively, and outline what we each want to achieve in the next quarter." Riley's eyebrows arched, a hint of skepticism woven into her expression. "Interesting idea, but what's the point without a clear objective? I don't want another session full of chatter." Her piercing insight sent him spiraling through every fear he had about vulnerability. He risked exposing not just his unfolding vision, but also his managerial flaws if things didn't click. Despite the trepidation twisting in his gut, the urgency grew within him. "There's value in dialogue, and it opens the door to accountability," he argued, feeling the resolve rise. "The real measure is follow-up, Mark. How are you going to ensure accountability in a team that's still hesitant to speak up?" Mark's eyes narrowed as he pondered her words. Engagement didn't merely exist in communal discussions. It demanded a framework of trust and an assurance of continued dialogue. If their spirits trembled at the idea of ongoing vulnerability, then he owed it to them to earn that trust back. The workshop needed a purpose beyond chatter. It needed actionable insights. Riley leaned against the table, assessing him. "What's your next move?" Her skepticism cut through his uncertainty. He needed to deliver a plan that would uphold both a vision and a constructive consequence. "I'll set it for Friday," Mark asserted. "I'll encourage everyone to arrive with personal insights on what success looks like for them, both individually and collectively." As soon as the words escaped, he felt the pulse of excitement racing through his veins. This workshop would not just be a gathering space, it would be a critical juncture that carved clarity between vision and action. The challenge now lay in his ability to pivot from apprehension to poised leadership. Now, as Mark resumed drafting the workshop details, An unexpected sense of urgency cascaded through him. He envisioned a space where vulnerability intersected with ambition. But could he dispense accountability as genuinely as he intended? With the clock ticking, he feared slipping back into the realm of hesitation. The real revelation awaited him in the coming days. Would he harness his fears as an opportunity to forge a strong bond with his team? As he hit send on the invitation, he grimaced at the thought of what lay ahead. The next few days would test not only his resolve to lead, but also reveal whether the transformative potential he sensed would translate into genuine action or crumble under pressure. Would the workshop finally establish the connection his team needed, or would he face the consequences of faltering at the threshold of his ambitious vision? As the clock inched toward Friday, Mark immersed himself in the workshop preparations, a whirlwind of possibilities swirling in his mind. Each detail mattered. The seating arrangement, the flow of discussions, even the snacks. But as the day approached, he realized that without tackling the underlying discomfort his team might feel, the workshop could dissolve into an echo chamber of polite conversation. He scrutinized the list of attendees, reflecting on the dynamics within the group. Each person brought distinct strengths and anxieties. Sarah, with her analytical prowess, often shied away in discussions. Tom thrived in creativity, but hesitated to share ideas that he perceived as unconventional. Given his own insecurities about being vulnerable, Mark wondered how he could foster an atmosphere conducive to open exchanges. In the quiet night before the workshop, Mark paced in his living room, wrestling with doubt. Was he truly ready to steer this ship? What if the team perceived him as unprepared? His pulse quickened at the thought of failure nudging closer, casting shadows over the excitement he once felt. He found himself reflecting on his own journey, how months earlier he had navigated the labyrinth of childhood traumas and self-doubt. Vulnerability was foreign territory, and yet here he was, on the verge of pushing both himself and his team into that very space. Would they accept him in that role? Deciding to reinforce his own sense of purpose, Mark drafted an email to share one final time about his vision. He poured his thoughts into each line, unwavering this time. He discussed the importance of vulnerable dialogue, emphasized that successes require collaborative efforts, and laid the groundwork for the accountability he envisioned through follow-up activities post-workshop. He hit send, a wave of catharsis washing over him. Friday arrived with a palpable energy. As his team gathered, the room buzzed with muted apprehension. Mark opened the session with authenticity, sharing not just the agenda, but his personal commitment to embrace each voice in the room. The skepticism he sensed in Riley's earlier remarks urged him to summon his best self. Today is about all of us. I want our discussions to delve into what success means for each of you. There's no wrong answer here. He paused, gauging their reactions. Eyes shifted toward him, some skeptical, others intrigued. He felt the weight of their expectations. Mark led them through icebreakers and prompts that nudged them to articulate their visions, celebrating each contribution as it emerged. Slowly, the atmosphere shifted from guardedness to engaged dialogue. Insights began to flow, revealing not just ambitions, but fears that mirrored his own. Just to clarify, are we thinking of a measurable way to track these insights? Sarah inquired, her tone dipping into uncertainty that quickly morphed into courage. Absolutely, he responded, encouraged. By defining actionable steps, we commit not only to our ideas but to one another. How do we hold ourselves accountable? Tom's voice, usually masked by hesitance, emerged next. What if we created pairing sessions, a buddy system? After this, check-ins could help ensure we stay on track. The conversation sparked, and Mark felt elements of teamwork weaving together like threads in a tapestry. The initial discomfort melted into an empowered discussion, revealing the raw talent within. Mark's heart raced with optimism. Vulnerability was proving to be connective tissue. At that moment, he understood that this workshop transcended a simple agenda. It was a catalyst for self-discovery not just for him, but for everyone in the room. As contributions swirled around him, he realized how crucial it was to embrace and nurture this evolution. However, just as momentum reached its peak, Mark noticed Riley's distant gaze. Despite the collaborative spirit, a flicker of skepticism lingered in her eyes. What was she withholding? Would she challenge him yet again before this sense of unity fully unfolded? As the team continued to discuss their visions, Mark felt the stirring of unresolved tension within him, a yearning for resolution. The challenge had transformed yet again. He not only needed to solidify this sense of teamwork, but also address the skepticism that lingered in the back of his mind. Would this workshop succeed in building bonds, Or would Riley expose a gap in his leadership when he least expected it? The stakes were rising. It was time to confront the barriers still standing in his way. Mark's pulse quickened as he observed Riley's expression. While the rest of the team engaged enthusiastically, she remained mottled with indecision, nestled in the safety of her skepticism. Could he afford to let that go unaddressed? His instinct to remain interconnected with the group's energy clashed with an urgent necessity for confrontation. "Hey, Riley!" Mark called, catching her off guard. The room fell silent as her name echoed in the otherwise lively chatter. "What's your take on everything we've discussed so far?" She blinked, her eyebrows slightly knit together in surprise, before crossing her arms defensively. "I'm still trying to digest it all," she replied, her voice restrained yet assertive. "I just don't see how these discussions translate into tangible results. Ideas are great, but execution is where the real challenge lies." The group leaned in, sensing the tension. Mark felt the weight of their attention, sensing that Riley's challenge could either fracture the emerging unity or foster an even deeper connection. The mental gears started turning. This was the moment where he could redefine the purpose of the workshop, transforming it into a symbiotic exchange of ideas and concerns. "Your point is valid," he responded, maintaining eye contact, willing to embrace the vulnerability he often skirted around. "It's easy to talk about ideas when we are all feeling excited, but without a plan, they just float away. Let's dig into what roadblocks you foresee and how we can tackle them together." Riley uncrossed her arms slightly, her interest piqued. What if the fear of taking risks stifles our creativity? What if those ideas we're so excited about face opposition or simply don't work? Mark nodded, acknowledging her insight, a pang of familiarity hitting him. It resonated with doubts from his past. Fear can be paralyzing. I've been there, but we need to view those uncertainties as stepping stones. Let's identify them now, so we can ground our creativity with confidence. The momentum in the room began shifting again. People leaned forward, eager to join the conversation. He turned to the rest of the team. "What fears do we have about moving forward?" Sarah raised her hand tentatively, voice breaking slightly. "I worry that my analytical approach might hold back the creative ideas from others, who might have a different style. I don't want to dampen enthusiasm." "Exactly!" Mark exclaimed, seizing the moment. "That mix is vital. We each have unique contributions, and navigating that intersection is part of our growth. Can we establish a space where we openly discuss these feelings before they become obstacles?" Tom added, "And maybe even structure how we can share our different styles, like in the best of both worlds." Riley, somewhat softened by the evolving dialogue, nodded in agreement. "If we can communicate openly, then maybe resistance can transform into collaboration instead of fear." Mark marveled at how the discussion had shifted from skepticism to constructive engagement, but the discomfort still yelled loudly within him. Challenges were emerging, leaving seeds of doubt in every corner of his thoughts, while simultaneously pushing him to evolve. The session wrapped up, but Mark's heart raced with uncertainty. Could he maintain momentum? What if those revelations only scratched the surface? As everyone filtered out, Mark suddenly felt a tap on his shoulder. Riley stood there, her expression unmasked. "Look, I genuinely appreciate how you turned this around. It's easy to be a critic. You've stepped up and I applaud that. But there's still this lingering question. Do you think we can really implement what we talked about?" As her words hung in the air, Mark felt a moment of intense clarity. It was no longer just about him or the workshop. It was about a commitment to not only foster dialogue, but also translate that dialogue into actionable outcomes. "I think we can," he said slowly, "if we hold each other accountable. But I need that commitment from you too, Riley, to challenge and push me as necessary." With a faint smile breaking through her earlier skepticism, she nodded. That simple exchange felt like an opening to a new chapter of their professional relationship, to tackle challenges together. But as the workshop momentum transformed into a partnership, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that confronting Riley was only the beginning. What other challenges lurked just beneath the surface? What fears or doubts would surface next? He could almost feel the storm brewing beneath the calm. Tomorrow would bring more. It was time to confront both personal doubts and lingering questions that danced at the edges of his professional aspirations. Mark awoke with renewed purpose, clarity guiding his thoughts as he considered the road ahead. The workshop had ignited something within him, an awakening of possibilities previously lost to the gloom of relentless ambition. He understood now that his journey was not just about improving corporate culture. It was about reshaping himself as a leader, willing to embrace vulnerability, accountability, and authentic engagement. As he arrived at the office, he could feel the energy humming through the building. Encouraged by the enthusiasm during the workshop, he stepped into his team's space with a newfound resolve. The interactions that had once seemed obligatory were now ignited with genuine curiosity. He aimed to nurture this developing atmosphere, turning dialogue into collaborative action. Each decision he made was a testament to his commitment to lead with integrity. "Riley, can we meet briefly?" Mark called, spotting her at her desk. As they sat down, the familiar apprehension crept back. "I've been thinking about the commitments we discussed during the workshop. We need a strategy to turn our plans into tangible results." Riley nodded thoughtfully. "I appreciate you seeking me out. Accountability will be crucial, and we can't let our good intentions fade after just one session." He leaned forward. "Okay, how do we structure our follow-ups? A bi-weekly check-in? We could align our collective goals with tangible metrics to assess progress." She considered it, her expression shifting towards anticipation. "That could work, but we need to ensure it's inclusive. Let's make sure every team member feels invested." With Riley's input shaping the foundation, Mark felt the momentum becoming a tangible project. They drew up balanced timelines and allocated specific roles based on each team member's strengths. Reinvigorated by their commitment to transparency and shared ownership, they finalized plans to establish a recurring feedback loop. It was a small victory fueled by collaboration, but a victory nevertheless, ready to expand into concrete achievements. As weeks passed, Mark felt the transition swirl around him. Motions towards collaboration anchored both his leadership and the work environment. Team meetings transformed into brainstorming showcases where everyone contributed, drawing upon their diverse talents. He noticed Claire and Tom nurturing emerging ideas, while Sarah's analytical mind shaped discussions into actionable strategies. The clarity he had sought in confrontation with his team blossomed into shared dedication. They were no longer just colleagues, but components of a dynamic and resilient unit. Growth became evident as projects formerly obstructed by miscommunication evolved into successful initiatives driven by cohesion. During a quarterly review meeting, he stood before his team, pride surging through him, not due to accolades or profit margins, but because they had demonstrated profound growth together. "I want to take a moment to celebrate what we have built. It's no longer just my leadership, it's us, flowing forward as a uniquely capable team. We've embraced the challenges, and together we are reshaping our success." The expressions around the table reflected a mix of pride and recognition that resonated with Mark's own feelings. He observed symbolic transformations in their body language, confident, engaged, and invested. Their shared journey had paved the way for heartfelt connections. Just as the meeting began to wrap, Riley raised her hand. "Mark, I think I speak for all of us when I say that the shift from competition to collaboration has profoundly impacted us. It's changed how we approach not just our work, but each other. Your vulnerability has paved the way for a space where we feel safe." Mark felt warmth spread across his chest, an unexpected but welcomed emotion in the often icy corridors of corporate competition. "It was never simply about me leading. It was about us growing both individually and as a team." It was the culmination of a journey that had begun with a simple texting error, morphing into meaningful relationships that nourished not just professional aspirations, but also personal fulfillment. Eager to uphold this newfound foundation, Mark dedicated himself to continuous improvement of their communicative approaches and performance measurements. He understood that the vulnerabilities he had embraced were now his greatest strengths, intertwining with accountability to create a supportive environment for everyone. As the weeks turned into months, his confidence solidified into an unwavering commitment to lead with compassion and integrity. Mark proved that success wasn't merely the absence of challenges, but the ability to navigate them with courage and open-heartedness. He had achieved goals through nurturing relationships, fostering innovation, and embracing vulnerability as a cornerstone of progress. With steady resolve, he drafted a letter to his team, outlining plans for a future mentorship program, an initiative aiming to help them develop leadership capabilities reliant upon the foundations they had cultivated together. He envisioned a cycle endlessly feeding back into their culture of collaboration and support. Revisiting that initial exchanging of messages with Lily, Mark felt immense gratitude washing over him. A simple mistake had transformed into an empowering journey, one of resilience, strength, and true individual commitment. As Mark prepared to share his vision for the new mentorship initiative, he affirmed in his heart that this was only the beginning. The future promised a canvas replete with opportunities for growth, one where he could continue inspiring others, not because he was esteemed, but because he had cultivated a rich, empathetic, and engaged environment. His humble recognition of the time it would take to sustain this journey fueled his determination. Mark wasn't merely leading a company anymore. He was sculpting a legacy. As that vision crystallized, he felt a profound sense of purpose envelop him and guide every step forward. This was the moment he had worked toward, the zenith of his journey, a culmination of inner transformation that translated into concrete achievements. He had conquered the depths of self-doubt, emerged resilient, and reclaimed the leadership role he never truly accepted. And now all that remained was to nurture this growth while steadfastly moving ahead. Now, stand with me at this moment and ensure you witness this transformation, this evolution from an ambitious leader to an inspiring beacon for others. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now because this is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.